Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. On the 31st of December, when most people are thinking about salads and fireworks, self-proclaimed Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko decided to talk about the eternal, the value of a peaceful sky above our heads. He chose a symbolic place for his philosophical musings too, the Horizon Holding Company. And the example he used for reflection was even more symbolic: Russia's missile strike on Ukraine's Kupyansk. Yes, that's right. While reflecting on peace, Lukashenko described in detail how missiles destroy industrial giants. The logic is complex, but as they say, it works in the Belarusian version of reality, one that's not even remotely cool enough to be called the Upside Down. So let's give it a new name. I don't know, Belaverse, maybe? There is Lukashenko instead of Vecna, and airspace violating balloons instead of Demogorgons. Would have made an abysmal fictional setting, but the problem is, it's actually real.
Ну вот представьте, идет война, такие производства уникальные, шикарные, одна ракета их нет. Мне, как деревенскому человеку, а знаете, деревни люди все экономные, в какой-то степени белорусы, и жадноватые, чтобы не потерять, чтобы свое было и прочее. Мне страшно представить, что это может исчезнуть мгновенно. Вот россияне нанесли орешником удар по Южмаш. Огромное предприятие, уникальнейшее было в Советском Союзе. Там 5 или 7 этажей под землей. И вот Орешник нанес по Южмашу один удар, и такого огромного предприятия, уникального, в мире не стало в одну минуту.
Anyway, back to our daily dose of dictator's delight. According to Lukashenko, in November 2024, the Russian Oreshnik missile allegedly destroyed a heavily protected industrial facility in a matter of minutes. The facility had between 5 and 7 floors underground, and during the Soviet era was being prepared for nuclear war. So, if you choose to believe Lukashenko, this was a tremendous success. Comrades, we've got a veritable Wunderwaffe on our hands. Cue the inevitable B-rolls of state officials clapping and all that. We've seen it all before. And now, time for the reality check. And it is going to be somewhat unpleasant for our not-so-friendly neighborhood dictator, because the real events look rather different. On the morning of the 21st of November 2024, Russia did indeed launch a missile strike on Dnipro, where the Makarov Southern Machine Building Plant, otherwise known as Kupyansk, is located. Later, Vladimir Putin personally announced that a ballistic missile with a non-nuclear warhead had been used. Thanks for telling us. We would never have known if a nuke actually went off somewhere in Eastern Europe. Anyway, Russian state media immediately reported serious destruction and scenes bordering on the apocalyptic. However, the Ukrainian side, based in part on satellite images, reported minor damage only. The plant apparently didn't even cease operations after that fateful night of serious destruction. Must be some Ukrainian sorcery then, because Russia would never ever lie about its military record, right? Experts note that Lukashenko's rhetoric did not appear by chance. It clearly coincides with statements by the Belarusian and Russian authorities about the possible deployment of the Oreshnik complex in Belarus. I suppose this is what passes for an ad campaign for those missiles. As seen on TV, this extraordinary missile will help you get rid of any unwanted industrial facilities in no time. What's next then? Door-to-door sales? Buy one, get one free? When you look at Lukashenko, ask yourself, would you buy a used intermediate-range ballistic missile launcher from this man? Funny thing is, he doesn't even own it. The International Ski Federation, or FIS for short, recently made a spectacular leap. Not while performing a traditional ski jump, you see, but instead a leap over its own rules. The organization granted so-called neutral status to Russian ski jumper Ilya Mankov, opening the way for him to compete internationally. That would be fine, but there is a catch. In 2023, the athlete was a soldier in the Russian army. The FIS regulations clearly state that neutral status cannot be granted to athletes associated with the armed forces of Russia, or Belarus for that matter. The wording seems to be as clear as day. But only until the fine print appears, you see. The FIS explained that the ban applies only to athletes who served voluntarily. But if a person was a conscript, then everything's fine. Not a soldier, but simply an athlete in uniform, temporarily, with a machine gun, but without ideology, at least on paper. Now, the FIS insists that the procedure was flawless. They say that within the framework of the so-called Athletes with Individual Neutrality program, a thorough verification system has been created, which even involves external specialists. All approved athletes, according to the federation, have successfully passed this check. What exactly was checked? Motivation, the form of the oath, or the degree of enthusiasm during service is not specified. But obviously, if you served without desire to serve, it's almost like you didn't serve at all. The situation with Mankov once again exposes the main problem with so-called neutral statuses. Neutrality is increasingly determined not by facts, but by wording. If you didn't want to serve, you're neutral. If you wanted to, but kept quiet, it's questionable. If you served yesterday, but are jumping ship today, it's okay, I guess. As a result, we have an athlete who until recently was part of the army of an aggressor state, and now is outside politics for some reason. It's a kind of quantum state, you see. He was in the army, but also he wasn't. Recently, Kremlin's chief propagandist Vladimir Solovyov suddenly lashed out with criticism, not at the Anglo-Saxons, not at NATO, and not even at Ukraine, but at his own people, namely the so-called Z-bloggers. The reason was their reports on the failures of the Russian armed forces in the Kupyansk area. Are you ready for some classic infighting? Here we go.
Мало просто все представление, все, для чего было сделано, вот эта истерика Купянска, для чего были похоронены, даже сложно сказать, сколько украинцев в жутком накате на Купянск, которые здесь подхватили кучу истериков, ни черта не понимающих в политике, которым важно было орать, все пропало, что работало абсолютно на хохлядскую карту. С криком «Мы одни знаем правду, что происходит, скажите!» Вот все кричали «Вот на этой улице, вот там, вот там». Не понимают, что это как раз полностью соответствует представлению Зеленского и прочих о том, что надо перед встречей. Потому что надо показать, что украинцы владеют ситуацией, что они перехватывают, что у них все хорошо. Видите, русские говорят всю неправду. И вот, пожалуйста, российские военблогеры верещат, как беременные свиньи.
So, according to Solovyov, a hysteria has been whipped up around Kupyansk, which has been picked up by a mob of hysterical people who understand nothing about politics. That is a quote, by the way. All these people, he says, are running around shouting that everything is lost, which allegedly works exclusively in Ukraine's favor. Simply put, if you have bad news, keep it to yourself. Or better yet, come up with some good news instead. After all, in the correct picture of the world, the Russian armed forces can either advance or regroup, but losing is out of the question. The logic demonstrated by Solovyov is as simple and elegant as a crowbar. Even if you are completely loyal to the regime, if you allow yourself to tell the truth, you're already a traitor in a way. And it doesn't matter whether it's complete or partial, the very fact of reality being actually shown to the world around you is always a crime. In this system, a Z-blogger is obliged not to report information, but to serve the myth. Fact-checking of any kind is obviously heresy in Russia, and speaking out of turn means you have likely outlived your usefulness of a propaganda crew. Funny how all those Z-bloggers who are no pacifists, let's be real, are now finding out that, to Russian state TV zealots, they're actually dangerous freethinkers. Guess that is really what happens when, as in Kupyansk, Russia tried a big push brandishing the letter Z, but was forced to take the L instead. And with this, we end this edition of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.